Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bob Safian. I'm the former editor-in-chief of Fast Company and host of the podcast Rapid Response, where I talk to CEOs from Airbnb to Starbucks to Salesforce. And I am delighted to moderate this special event today for the Global Thought Leadership Institute, exploring what's on the horizon for thought leadership in 2026. And I'm joined by a great set of experts, Lucia Rahilly, the Global Editorial Director at McKinsey, Joss Simpson, a Global Editorial Director at Heidrick and Struggles, Catherine Andrews, Global Editorial Senior Director at Boston Consulting Group, and Anthony Marshall, Global Leader of the IBM Institute for Business Value. I want to thank all of you for being here, all of those panelists for joining us. Um, as we look ahead to 2026, there is no topic that is more top of mind for your colleagues, for the executive audiences that you're talking to, than the impact of AI. Everyone is in some degree of flux, trying to navigate what they need to know and to do right now, what's going to be a priority in 2026. When I talk to CEOs across industries, there's enthusiasm publicly, but privately, there's lots of trepidation. We hear assertions about AI savings and opportunities. We also hear about disruption and unsatisfying AI projects, layoffs, hype. I want to go through all this with these terrific panelists, with all of you in kind of two separate threads. First, I want to ask you about how AI is being implemented in your organization. What's changed, what's changing, what's been good and not as good. And then, secondly, more broadly, to talk about what you're hearing and seeing in other industries and what your research indicates we should expect from AI overall in 2026. And along the way, this group, by the way, for everyone who's signing in, is happy and eager to take your questions. So please feel free to add comments and questions in the chat, and we'll try to integrate them as much as we can. Um, uh, Catherine, Joss, Lucia, Anthony, are you guys ready to go?
Yep.
Ready to
Absolutely.
All
rock.
right, great. So let's jump in. And Joss, I'd like to start with you because you said something to me when we talked last time. You said that your internal AI efforts so far are somewhat limited. And I was curious what you meant by that and whether you can explain that and sort of why.
I think it's really just we're still piloting, figuring out what works with us for thought leadership and what doesn't. So, internally, we've been really happy with a fair bit of what we're doing in terms of a lot of efficiencies, things like summarizing podcasts and kicking up ideas for titles. And the place where we're still developing is we do a lot of surveys, we do a lot of interviews, we have a lot of questions. And we ask a lot of questions, we ask a lot of similar questions. And what we're working on right now is developing a better AI tool to help us reframe questions, update them, set them in a new context. And so I would say it's not so much that we're limited, but we certainly aren't using it for everything, and we're
Mm.
piloting as we go along, sticking with what works and really trying to be constructive about where we could most use more efficiencies and how AI could help us get there. And that's
Mm.
where the question shaping really comes in.
Catherine, you talked to me about AI written drafts being submitted by your authors, and I'm curious, like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Well, I would say it's a decidedly mixed thing. On the one hand, I do think we are seeing some drafts that are, quite good and are requiring significantly less editorial investment um, than, a writer starting from an outline, say. On the other hand, I think one of the dangers is that a piece can look good, but
Mm.
then, ooh, and yes, confetti.
That means
But
look
then
good. You get the confetti for it. Yes.
but then when you really dig into it, there are hallucinations. They've missed the main point of a piece. So it really takes a lot of that human editorial judgment still.
Mm.
What we are doing at BCG is we are developing a custom GPT for author teams that really embeds uh, issues or and addresses issues like risk and also just, what do we consider good? What does good look like for us? And kind of teaches the GPT to lead the author teams through that. And we would
But
only use that
it
for a certain type of content
so it's
for
like a guide. It's not that you're expecting this GPT to give you a beginning to end.
yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a guide. Yeah. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Lucia, I saw you when Catherine was talking about AI written drafts, you were kind of grinning or nodding. How do you handle AI created materials? Do you label things that had AI impact as being like this was created with the help of whatever tool you're using?
So we don't publish anything that hasn't been substantially re-edited. I was
Mm.
in part smiling because we have also that experience with human drafts, right? Where you get a draft from a consultant and you're like, oh, look at this, it's really robust.
Yeah.
We can turn this around in a few days. And then, you sit down and focus on it and all the flaws and logic and the capacity investment that will be required to transform it into actual thought leadership and not just like a restatement of previously published material become evident. So I think, we're used to getting drafts that need to be overhauled. And I think that one of the differences is that often these AI drafted pieces of text come in and they appear to be in better condition because they're grammatical and so forth, right?
Uh-huh.
And they've got like subheads and furniture. But when you read them, they just need a lot of work. So we don't
Mm.
have to label anything because we don't actually put anything out that is that has not like then required multiple conversations with the team and all kinds of additional research and so forth. But
So
it's
the
it's
AI
it
gets the formatting, but it doesn't really get like what people are actually coming for.
yeah, it's like a genre convention, right? It's like genre fiction, in a way.
Mhm.
Good
So
enough.
Anthony, I'm curious how you're using AI at IBV. I mean, you have access to all of IBM's technology, so that you should be able to like be, no? How's it
Well,
how does it
I
work?
was I was at a meeting yesterday, and someone said, "Who's used AI?" And I felt like it was like a setup because if I didn't say yes, I'd be fired, right? Because we're an AI company, we have to use AI, and so we have the benefit of having many of the tools available to us, but also the expectation that we're going to be using AI. And so we've been introducing it at various parts of the value chain. From design. A couple of years ago, we co-brand with Adobe, so we with Adobe Firefly, we did a lot of the design of that study with that, and we've developed multiple assistants to help. It's almost like standardized writing, like
Hmm.
train it to help produce good writing, and that sort of at least sort of makes it very active writing. But
Mm.
to Lucia's and others' point, it's got to be, the humanity of the writing has to come through, and so it's really, the AI is a tool. It can make things more efficient. It can speed up things, but ultimately, really talented editors and writers need to be involved. Also on the data side, we're using synthetic data and other things through the value chain. But I agree completely that It's the humanity that that brings the originality, and
Mm.
that's absolutely essential.
I
I
like
mean,
to say, sorry.
go ahead, jump in.
I like to say that that the chat GPT doesn't have a soul, and only a human writer editor can bring that soul to the
Yeah,
writer.
yeah.
I think that's true. And I think the other thing is the mix of proprietary internal AI tools and a chat GPT or other external tools. It's the distinctive knowledge that all of our firms have and all of our consultants have can only come internally. So then there are tensions about, do you put that into chat GPT? And I think we're not supposed to, and I hope people don't on the whole. But if it's purely written by an external AI, then a piece is by definition not including anything that is distinctive and proprietary to your own firm. And I think that's a real tension in trying to find the right ways to use AI in thought leadership.
Mm.
We have
I mean,
enterprise chat though. I have to say, I
Mm.
kind of heart chat GPT. I mean, I know it's soulless, but it can make life significantly easier now that we have it in enterprise format and we're allowed to use it. You know, you have these instances where you're asked to write the same thing for a variety of audiences like this.
Mhm.
I just had this experience the other day where I had to write the same email. Now write it for these leaders. Now could actually that's pretty good. Can you write it actually? Could you write it on behalf of this person for these leaders? And you know, after a certain point, you're like, oh, and chat can just give you that little lift you need,
Mm.
right? To
Mhm.
reposition
It's
quickly and
great for
then
that
you
stuff.
can, yeah.
I mean, I'm curious because you all want to like generate more content, better, faster, cheaper, right? That's what the burden is, better, faster, cheaper. And that's the promise of what the AI is. Are those savings, is that efficiency actually there for you? Are there things that are harder? Catherine's immediately like shaking her head no.
No, I would say to date, we have not seen the kind of efficiencies that we have projected. So I would say right now we're seeing maybe about, in terms of writing thought leadership, maybe 7% efficiencies with an ultimate goal of 30%. Um, what our writers are experiencing is that it really helps them a lot with their first draft, but the real time consuming part of the process is in the iteration back and forth with our author partners. And it's really, once it hits that stage, it becomes a less valuable tool.
Hmm. What about like hallucinations, sort of? I mean, I think Lucia, you mentioned something about sort of increased fact-checking challenges. Like, what's the trade-off between sort of content creation resources versus fact-checking resources?
So, I mean, as you might predict, we're McKinsey, right? So we're trying to pull AI straight through the value chain and try to gain efficiencies throughout. I think there are efficiencies to be gained in fact checking. At the same time, AI puts more pressure on fact checking because of these hallucinations. And also, I mean, Catherine and I were talking a little bit about this. So I'd also be interested in her perspective, but like, you know, we have to be very careful about syntheses that use competitor data,
Mhm.
right? Like we don't cite competitor data in our own research.
Mhm.
And so we need to be very clear on
Mm,
where the data is coming from that we're citing. And now that we are getting these drafts from, you know, often from junior level consultants that are tasked with drafting for senior folks based on packs and conversations and ideas and so forth, we have to just be super rigorous about investing in fact checking from the get, basically.
mm.
Absolutely, and it's become a large part of our writers' role. And and the writer's role is undergoing a real change as a result.
Mhm.
So we also, for our writer teams, not for the drafts that are coming from our consultants, but for our writers teams, they often shut off the internet, the um, um, our custom GPT, which is based on the enterprise version of Chat GPT, they shut off the internet so that the GPT is only taking information from what the writers are feeding it. So
Mm.
that's one way to mitigate risk.
I mean, that one of the, I guess, interesting observations from this is, I guess what I find, I'm not sure whether Anthony or Josh you want to address this, but like the the thought leadership that you produce is about how other industries are changing and how AI is changing those industries. And yet for your work itself, it seems like it's been a very mixed bag, or at least is so far. Like, does that experience impact how you interpret what you're getting from other industries, what you're hearing outside, you know?
I think so. Let's take the automotive industry, for example. And so, of all the industries that I'm familiar with, auto has a real vision of, this sort of advanced mobility. There's a very clear vision about what the automotive industry is going to look like in 2035, or at least there has been. The challenge in the automotive industry now is how are they going to fund getting to that vision, given the other changes that are happening in the industry. They need to get money from somewhere. And so the opportunity is to apply AI across the various functional areas of the industry to try and capture the money to be able to invest in the innovation that's required to sort of realize this vision. And I think that sort of thing is happening more and more. And so any robust examples of the application of AI to specific functional areas where money can be saved is an opportunity to reinvest in the technology that's going to be required to really drive this sort of future. And that's sort of the conversation that's emerging that I've been seeing certainly over the last few months, I think.
Mm.
And I think what we've been seeing is a lot of focus on finding returns from investments in AI. For a couple of years, everyone was excited about it. Everyone was trying it everywhere. And now there's a lot of focus on, okay, what's actually working for us? What are our biggest opportunities? And that's going to look different in the automotive industry than a CPG company or a professional services company. And I think leaders are more and more focusing on what's really specific to them. And I think we're all saying that in some way too. We're focusing on where it
Yeah.
works well for us. And so I think it hasn't gone away. In a sense, AI has become another normal tool, and it's being looked at as other tools are.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of, managing expectations that you have to do sort of for your team, for your subject matter experts, for your bosses. Lucia, you grinned when I said that. So what did that mean?
Well, we're in the service of enabling thought leaders to get their insights to market. They don't necessarily understand what goes on behind the scenes. So when they come with something, now that we have Gen AI, there can be an expectation that like this could be now out the door in 24 hours and really doesn't need that much. Um, we we actually, I mean, one issue is that as you know, Gen AI can be kind of sycophantic. It has a client service mindset.
Mm.
So one tool that we're tuning and we're having to tune fairly aggressively that we were in part would help us in the McKinsey way have like an objective fact-based scoring system as this distinctiveness tool that was going to score a draft that comes in and in an automated way so that we could say, it's not we who think your draft is, needs a tremendous amount of improvement and all kinds of euphemisms for, needs work. it's really this tool. As you can see, it doesn't score well on this tool. Unfortunately, like we're testing the tool, and we'll put like a total piece of garbage into the tool, and it's like fantastic draft, top score, very extremely distinctive. So I do think there's expectation management with our internal clients that has to happen. But I also sympathize because I think, to the point about adoption externally, leaders in every sector are under tremendous pressure because of the disruption that AI is causing across the board. And it's more important than ever for us to get these insights to them more quickly, because that enables them to act in a, higher impact, higher ROI way. So, so there's a need. There's a need in a way that, 10 years ago the need may have been far less, and there was like a slower pace was more acceptable because the disruptions were less exigent.
I'm curious, Catherine, this idea about sort of managing expectations. You said earlier that like GPT doesn't have a soul, but these tools are also advancing and changing very fast. And who's to know what might happen in the next version of it? I'm not necessarily saying they're going to have a soul, but they may be able to, to do things that we're not expecting them to do now. Like, how do you think about those transitions for yourself, for your team, for the folks you're consuming your content?
So, I mean, we are continually, we've seen it improve substantially already, right? And we are continually adopting, new strategies, pivoting as the AI improves. We are continually pivoting. So it's not like you can have a strategy, a 3-year strategy on how we are going to, ultimately be using AI, because we don't know, because it's changing so quickly. So it's just, you have to be really agile and adapt, and as it improves, we will adapt our strategy as necessary. But we are also seeing, just simple things, Joss, like you were saying. We have hundreds and hundreds of bios that we used to have to write every year of our MDPs. It's all automated now. It's all AI. And just an editor looks over it quickly. So there are many, many use cases that have created enormous efficiencies. But I will also say that efficiencies have been gained not only through the use of AI, but just, we don't write 10,000 word reports anymore, right?
Yeah.
People aren't reading long anymore. So we're getting.
Well, that was what my question was going to be. Does it work for long form as well as short form? And you're saying the long form is just not as
Well, the long form is 4,000 words instead of 10, right? And it does work less well, I think, for long form.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think, to Lucia's point about the emails, one thing that AI can be useful for is helping chunk up a larger report, at whatever size larger is now, into also the smaller nuggets that we all want, whether it's industry specific slices or, a social post. It can be very helpful in creating those subsidiary complementary assets that can take up a lot of editors' time and can take up less now. They still all need to be edited by people, but you can get a fair way down the path of the initial substance of those smaller assets too.
There's a version of personalization that inheres in that, Joss, right? Like everyone is so, there's the holy grail of N of 1 personalization that AI is slated to enable, when I don't know, but that's much discussed. And although we're certainly not at that point for a variety of reasons, some of which, like, we just don't have sufficiently granular data about our readership and so forth yet. It can help, like, take existing material, to your point, and personalize for different audiences, at least as a starter draft. Less good, it can't come up with something net new on its own, because It's
Mm.
relying on previously published material, but
Mm. The chat is blowing up with questions that I'm going to go to shortly, but I wanted to ask you, Anthony. One of the things that people say about AI is like it might not raise the ceiling, but it raises the floor, which means there's a lot more competition. And I'm curious how you think about sort of the thought leadership that you guys are creating, the thought leadership that's being created around you, and like what's defined as thought leadership now and what will be distinctive about it in the future? Like, is that line moving at all?
Well, I think thought leadership is still thought leadership. What does it need to have? It needs to be it needs to be something that's topical, something that's engaging in a value, a topic that's a value. For us, it needs to have some sort of data. It needs to have a point of view, and it needs to have an action coming out of it. And whether that's an infographic or a 6,000 word study or a blog, if it's got those components, then in my mind, it's thought leadership.
Mm,
Um, Certainly, there's been a massive expansion of content, but also there's growing resistance from the data that we're seeing in terms of a lack of, basically people can sense synthetic content, if you will, very easily, much more
mm,
easily than one would think, and people don't want it.
Mhm.
People, the sense of originality and authenticity is the thing that differentiates. Having proprietary original data is the thing that differentiates,
Hmm.
and that's what the data is showing as well. It's interesting that the latest data that we're seeing, executives are very suspicious of AI in the creation of content, but they want to use AI to engage with content and interrogate content. And so that's sort of to Lucia's point about micro segmentation. That's how that can be revealed. Now, we're not there yet, but it's certainly an area of great interest for us to sort of pursue.
mm. All right, let me go to some of the questions here, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of them because there are a slew of them. But one of the questions from Sarah Michaels is about sort of as a business whether you've had to create an AI policy. I know all of you are part of larger organizations that may have their own AI policy. Do you have your own? How do you think about sort of what you can and can't use it for, and whether that's something that's different than through the rest of your organization? No one wants to take that one.
I would say we follow our organization's policy. We are not at this time building a bespoke AI for thought leadership, which I think many of the others are. And so I
Hmm.
think as we develop more specifically related to thought leadership, we may well need our own policy, but right now we're following the firm-wide policy.
Hmm.
Yeah, and likewise, and Catherine, I would imagine similar guidelines apply in your case because our organizations are similar. Like you should comment. We have super strict policy on confidentiality, and our material has to be fully syndicated before it sees the light of day. So we have to use enterprise specific tools. We can't,
Mhm.
you know, I love Claude.
Hmm.
Um, my husband uses it all the time for this and that, but I can't use it because we don't have enterprise cloud. Like we haven't integrated it into our
Mm.
suite of tools. And so I can't use it. We just got Perplexity. I just got an email about it this morning, so I'm interested there. I've used that for personal things and also sometimes for Bob, I don't know if you do this yourself. Sometimes I ask Perplexity for suggestions for questions on a podcast on published material just to see what it has to say and how it differs from chat.
Mhm.
I
But
actually do that when I'm being interviewed. I assume that the interviewer is going to do that. So to be prepared, I want to know what questions they're going to give me, you know?
it's an excellent idea.
Yeah, just remember everybody, people are using it, right? So you prepare yourself accordingly.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious. One of the questions here, you're all part of, as I say, bigger organizations. There are a few questions about like what do you do to put in like back end governance about data structures and training approaches and valuation. Do you have advice for folks who are at smaller places who may not have those tools being provided for them? How you would navigate that to sort of put those pieces in place? I mean, what are the best practices?
I
Yeah.
think use caution, because if you've got proprietary data and you start uploading it in one of these large language models, suddenly it's not proprietary anymore.
Mhm.
it's part of the corpus. And so that's when, as each of us have been talking about enterprise AI, that's what that means, right?
Yeah.
And so it means that the data is not saved in a public environment, in a public corpus. But if you're just using tools available, then it will be, and that negates the potentially it negates the originality and specificity of that data. So just be
Mm.
cautious. Although there are lots of tools available and they can be incredibly useful, but just be aware of the potential risks in doing so.
Yeah, I mean there are a handful of questions here that are because folks are interested about these sort of bespoke tools that you are using or creating, using for your own data that are improving things. And but they're also like they're trying to figure like what can I use that's an enterprise version of something that someone else is doing versus what I have to do myself.
I saw a question. First of all, I think the whole process, it's a lot of test and learn and test and learn
Yeah.
in building bespoke tools. It does not, we have been working on our tools for a year and a year and a half now, and they're still not where, we would ideally like them to be. So it's an ongoing process. I think also just in terms of bringing writers and editors along, it really helps to make them a part of the process in terms of getting their insights in, how is this working? How is this not working? Is really invaluable. So including the team in the development is
Hmm.
Mhm.
We're having a lot of success with even just using Enterprise Copilot to do data validation, which is very time consuming, very manual, and we're getting a lot of benefits from that, for example. So there are tools available that are incredibly can be incredibly powerful. Do it now able to do things that you just wouldn't have expected just a few months ago.
Mhm.
But again, the only reason we're discovering these things is because our teams are experimenting and are encouraged to experiment. But again, within an enterprise environment, right?
But
So
will it like find patterns in the data that you have that your humans haven't uncovered?
not necessarily analytically. So it's
Hmm.
not we're not using it for now. Well, with the exception of synthetic data generation, which is sort of very specialized. Um, we're not using it for that, but in terms of data validation and
Hmm.
making sure that data is actually correct and accurate um, uh, across various cuts and things, whether it's an industry cut, geo cut, whatever. Um, the data can really explode very rapidly if you start doing those sorts of things, and we're seeing great success in making that process much more efficient and robust,
Hmm.
um, and less subject to human error.
I mean, one concern I've heard is about how public AI models like ChatGPT or others, how they interpret your materials, that it might be like less nuanced than you intend, and that sort of forces you to market or frame your projects in a different way, maybe more literal, maybe less provocative. Are those conversations that you're thinking about, that you're having about how is our data going to be interpreted by an AI before it gets back to, as one of you said, a lot of folks use it for they'll feed content in to get feedback about it.
Right. So I think that's a really interesting question, in part because we've had robust discussion internally about visibility on LLMs and optimizing for GEO and AEO in the same way that we have historically optimized for SEO. GEO and AEO look for particular formulations and ingest in a particular way, at least right now. But of course, that's fast changing. And so this has led to discussions about, what does the future of the website look like? Is there a public-facing website that is the human interface, and kind of another version like the SEO version that some we sometimes do for some of our pieces? We'll have an SEO title that's super searchable, and then a title that we think is clever and economists like or whatnot. So, will there be a version of content that is designed to maximize crawlability and ingestion by the LLMs in a way that's super clear? We haven't advanced on that yet, but it's like definitely on the part of the discussion.
Mm. Josh, were you going to say something?
We're also thinking the other way. We've been doing some more pieces that we distribute privately to our clients and don't put on the website, just to really drive discussions, deep discussions with clients and contacts that the rest of the world doesn't know about. And partly that's creating more exclusivity for people with whom the firm has relationships, and partly it's we don't want some of this stuff commoditized through being scraped by LLMs. So we're thinking about it in both ways, both optimizing for what we do make public and also thinking about what we might not make public.
I know we only have a few more minutes left, and I realize we haven't gone as broadly into sort of other non-AI related insights for 2026. But I'd love to have each of you sort of, if there are things that are beyond the kind of internal discussions we've had, or like what are the whether I don't know whether it's personalization, like are there other insights, things that are on your mind for 2026 that we haven't touched on that that you feel like your colleagues would benefit from?
Well, in terms of our priority topics for 2026, I mean, obviously, content on AI for our audiences. Cost is a big theme. And we have, as have I think many of us, we've moved away from climate and sustainability. We still have the practice area. It's no longer a major campaign. But I would say AI for BCG as a business in general, as I think for, Lucia, I'm sure you for McKinsey, it's similar. AI is really the top business priority, in addition to content priority.
Lucia, do you agree with that? Are there other things that
Yeah.
pop up for you?
So obviously, obviously AI, agentic AI, this idea which might be applicable to folks who work in smaller shops of reimagining workflows. We hear and read again and again that the gap between the anticipated ROI of AI and the realized ROI is in part because workflows have not yet been reimagined in a way that allows folks to maximize AI's value. And I think in a smaller shop, you could think about like you're not necessarily wedded or calcified as much as those of us who are in longer running shops and have very specific workflows. So that's something, but agentic and sort of autonomous decision making, I think is going to be really interesting. On climate and sustainability, I think one interesting thing that I find heartening because have children and want them to live in a world that's not on fire, etc., is that AI obviously requires so much energy that it's hopefully going to drive the energy transition to some degree because it's just so power intensive that, traditional fossil fuel um, based energy supply will be insufficient. So we'll have to we'll have to turn to SMRs and nuclear and all these other things. I think the other thing for us is like we really, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I think our video tends to be kind of like 6, 7, as the kids say. We haven't really cracked that in terms of our audience, but we do see that um, the data showing that executives are consuming video much more on YouTube. So we are going to give a lot of thought in 2026 to creating a more purposeful video strategy and doing more in that space to try to meet our clients where they are.
Yes, it still astounds me that so many people listen to my podcast by watching it on YouTube, but they do. But they
Yes.
do. So you have to meet them where they are. Joss, any sort of summarizing or total insights for 2026 you want to add to this?
I think video for us as well. And I think we do leadership organization culture. And so for us, the AI angle is both about what leaders need to know about AI, but how it's changing how executive teams work and changing culture, and also how companies can use their culture to help enable AI and drive change, whether it's change in workflows, change in tools, change in organizational models. And the other thing that we are spending a lot of time with is executive succession planning up and down the line. We know our research shows that most companies aren't really satisfied with what they're doing. And as the world moves faster, it's only harder to find the leaders you need and to figure out what leaders you'll need in 3 months or 3 years or 10 years. And so how companies are thinking through that whole set of activities and what the ones who are more satisfied with what they're doing are doing. So those are our big focuses.
Anthony, you're the last one answering this question,
Awesome.
so a lot of ground's been covered. You have to find something new.
Well, I was going to say, Bob, the reason why they consume your podcast on YouTube, they want to see you, Bob. They want that experience. So in terms of content, just briefly, so IBM is a AI hybrid cloud quantum computing organization, and so of course our content's going to intersect all of that stuff. But in terms of what I see as the big opportunity is we know that a very large proportion of executives want to use AI to engage with and interrogate content. And so that's a huge opportunity. I'm not sure how we're going to realize it, but that for us is the project for 2026 about how to make that a reality, or at least get closer to it. And so that's a project we've set ourselves for, and hopefully we'll have something compelling by the end of the year.
I mean, are you testing like interrogating your own content using AI and sort of getting information back that way?
We're starting to. It's and perfecting it internally. So tools to interrogate our content. So ask IBV, for example. But bringing that externally is the next step, and what else that entails.
Hmm.
How much data are you going to embed in there? How are you going to do that? And so there's lots of open questions, but that's something that we're really going to explore over the coming months.
Well, I want to say one of the things that fascinates me about this area is how quickly everything is moving and how difficult it is to lead and make decisions and stay on your toes as you go through all of this. And I want to say that I really appreciate the four of you taking time with this audience and this group to sort of share your experiences and your insights. It's really meaningful, and we thank you for your time. And we thank everyone who has joined in for their time and for being here. We encourage you to put on your calendar February 5th and 6th the Global Thought Leadership Institute 2026 Symposium in Houston, Texas. I promise you it will be worthwhile. So please put it on your calendar and check it out. We hope you can see you there. If you want to stay in touch with the Global Thought Leadership Institute, you can follow on LinkedIn, their webinar and events. You see the emails there, and you can of course join the mailing list where you'll be up to date about everything. The next webinar is coming January 13th at 10 a.m. Central Time, raising the standards, defining standards in thought leadership with Anthony's colleague Cindy Anderson from the IBM Institute for Business Value. Once again, I want to thank Anthony, Lucia, Joss, and Catherine for their time. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Happy holidays.